Hey everyone, it's Mark here at Lowen University. Welcome to lesson 123. On this lesson, I'll be teaching you how to write contrasting bass lines. And by contrasting, I mean writing bass parts, lines, or grooves that contrast the rest of the composition and don't necessarily attach themselves to a guitar part or a drum part or a piano part. And they sort of weave their own path by looking for what I call the negative space in a composition. So a little bit on creativity. We all know that creativity can't be taught. At least that's what we're told. I believe that creativity is equal within everybody. It's just about what makes it come out of you. How do you get it out from the inside? And I think creativity is best facilitated by having lots of options. And what I'm going to be talking about in this lesson, giving you sort of an overview on, is giving yourself more options as a bass player. I made the analogy at the Warwick Bass Camp. If you have two world-class chefs, one here, you give this guy 2 ingredients, and you give this guy an entire pantry full of ingredients, and you tell them both, all right, see how many different recipes and dishes you can make, go. Well, at the end of it, everyone's going to look from the outside and look at this guy and go, well, look at this guy. He's way more creative. Look at all these different dishes he came up with. So creative. They're going to look at this guy and go, well, you only came up with 1 or 2 things. You're not very creative. But little does anybody on the outside know that it was all about what they had to work with. Both are equally as talented, equally as creative, but one had more options to work with than the other. So creativity to me is about giving yourself tons of options by really knowing the fretboard, knowing how to listen to a composition, and narrowing it down until you have something really good. The more you have to work with, the better the outcome you will yield. I always live by that as a creative musician. So I'm going to be using a clip from Atlas Novus. It's Scale the Summit's 4th album, one of the tracks on there. I'm going to play through sort of this middle section that I get asked about quite a lot. And this is one of my prime examples about writing contrasting bass lines. I'm going to go ahead and play it for you first, then we'll break it down. I'll tell you what I'm thinking. And again, the whole point of this lesson is to get you thinking. We're going to delve more into this in the future, but right now I just want to leave you thinking differently than you had before you click play on this lesson. Okay, let's listen to that really quick. Here's a part from Atlas Novus. So that was the middle section of Atlas Novus. This is a part I get asked about all the time, and a lot of questions I get are sort of, well, how did you come up with something that cool and that unique, and how are you so creative, and that sounds super awesome. What's your mindset with thinking that? And I don't think it's any of those things. I don't even think it's a creative part. It's just my response to how can I add something to the composition I haven't done before? How can I really be smart about it and occupy the empty space? What is nobody else doing? What can I add that contrasts with everything else? Okay, there's a lot of questions I live by that I sort of ask myself. I actually ask myself questions when it comes time to write bass lines, and what that does is it really gets me thinking and gives me a big picture perspective of the composition. It allows me to sort of step back. Lots of times we come down to write bass parts and we're all about, okay, E minor, the major third is G sharp, but we're in you start thinking all this theory stuff and you're so into the fretboard that you don't really listen to the song. That's what I want to really get you to do. Listen to the composition, not just hear it as background noise. And we have this really liberating position and freedom as a bass player. I believe we have the most creative freedom in the whole ensemble, the bass does, because oftentimes we write our parts close to last or last, and we record close to last or last. So we kind of come at the very end and see what everybody else is doing and sort of pick and choose what parts we want to accent Or we can think, well, what's nobody else doing yet? I'm really about that mentality, really looking at the composition and finding the empty space. One of the things I told the students in the Warwick classes that I was talking about at the beginning of the video, I taught the camp, one of the things I told them was, when you came into this classroom, did you sit in an empty seat or did you sit on top of somebody's lap in a seat that was already taken? No, everyone came in and found an empty seat. So when I listen to a composition that needs bass, maybe there's already a guitar, piano, or drums, I'll kind of think, well, he's doing that, he's doing that, he's doing that, but nobody's doing this. Maybe I can kind of go that direction, and that can help me to glue everything together. How to write contrasting bass parts. That's exactly what I'm thinking when I hear this. So if we go back and listen to this clip, I'll show you exactly how I thought about this. So let's take a listen to that same section. Okay, so listen to that. What we have here, I'm going to narrow it down to two things. For the guitar parts, we have single notes in the higher register. Listen. There's no chords going on. Nobody's doing sort of mid-rangey multi-note stuff. It's very single notes in the higher register. Listen. So when I hear that, kind of in this contrasting mindset, I think, okay, let's narrow this down to two things. Single notes, high register. I wouldn't want to come in and start going, because that would be stepping on toes. Somebody's already doing that. I want to think about what is the opposite of what they're doing. Single notes, higher register. What's the opposite of that? Multiple notes, lower register. That's literally the exact opposite. That's where I found the creativity came from. I gave myself an option. I didn't think about all this other theory stuff. Of course, I'm playing in E minor and G major because these are simple chords, but beyond that, creativity is not about knowing music theory. It's about really knowing how to add to the composition in your own way. Single notes, higher register. Opposite, multiple notes, lower register. That gives me the perfect opportunity to come in and go multiple notes in the lower register. They're up here going. I wouldn't want to come up here and start going. Same reason. I want to go the other way and do something where nobody's taken up. If you listen to the mid-range of that song, we have a lot of drums, big kick drum sound, kind of on that lower end, and over here we have the guitar part on the higher end. Okay, we got guitar up here, drums down here. Listen. We got nothing right here, so I'm coming in the middle and doing multiple notes in the chordal section. So if I start strumming chords, that's obviously the natural thing to do because there are chords being played under those guitar parts. They're very arpeggiated, kind of going. They're kind of outlining an E minor. So that right there is all I need to think about as far as music theory. They're playing E minor. If I'm going to play multiple notes in the mid-range register, that's all I need to do. So I'm sort of going along and playing chords now. Okay, but that's kind of a boring part and really doesn't drive the bass melodically at all. So if I go back and play that exact same thing, you know, without the tapping, okay, if I do that, yeah, it fills it up, it finds the mid-range. I got the high guitar stuff here, low drums, big kick drum sound down here. I'm filling up the middle range and giving it some contrast. But I wanted to sort of add on to that and really drive those notes. Right now the guitar parts are just kind of going, and I wanted to really come behind it and accent it, really make it driving. And by using these modern techniques, tapping in chords, I can do that perfectly. I have a whole free hand this whole time. So I thought, well, let me combine that. Maybe I can play multiple notes in the lower register, the opposite. Maybe I can also bring my plucking hand in, do some tapping, and accent that upper part. So when I come up with a part like, people go, wow, that's so creative. I'm like, no, I'm playing an E minor chord, and I'm playing the guitar part with the other hand. I guess the creative part would be using those techniques, but we're seeing the evolution of the electric bass, and a lot of people are doing tapping and chords and those kind of things now. So I don't view this as creative at all. I view it as just, it's a contrasting part, which is why it kind of stands out. So if I kind of go back, add tapping. It fills it out nicely. If I go back and compare the two, you can hear how much difference that tapping just adds. Now moving on to this chordal section. So before we get there, I want to sum that up. Higher notes in the single register is what was going on. I just literally said the opposites. Everybody can say the opposites. Dark, light, hot, cold. Single notes, multiple notes. Higher register, lower register. There's nothing creative about that. I'm just looking for contrast. And by asking myself those questions, like what is nobody else doing, that's how I come up with the idea to play the chords. And a lot of people go, well, why didn't you do like a real thick bass groove there? I'm like, well, I haven't done chords yet in the piece, and that's what sort of makes bass playing multi-dimensional. I can do those types of things in 2016. It's okay to do. But the real reason is there were already chords being played in the song, and I'm not really playing any of the earlier part of the song, so if you haven't heard this, you might not know that. But yeah, there's two guitar players in this band, and they're playing lots of chordal stuff in the previous part of the song. So when they drop out with the chords, it's acceptable for somebody else to come in and start playing chords. Why? Because they were already being played. That gives me an okay pass to do that. How I played the chords, where I played them, I made the opposites. What I did with the tapping hand, I'm literally playing the exact guitar part. If you listen to those notes, it's literally note for note. I mean, I'm literally following that exact thing with the tapping, pretty much note for note. So there's really no science to it. I'm just sort of plugging and playing. But it's how I use the parts and where I use them in the composition that makes them creative, okay? Now I'll sort of extrapolate the same thing to the next part. So right now we have a very static sort of guitar part going on. This is all sort of... all this stuff is sort of in the same register. The notes are moving around, but they're sort of in that one octave. So that kind of tells me, well, because they're static, I need to be static too, to be in harmony with them. But if you listen to this next part, a lot more movement now. So before it was now it's really arpeggiating. Still single notes, still in the higher register, so the same things apply. I'm still playing mid-range multiple notes in the lower register. So same things apply there about how I'm writing that part. I'm just going to give it a little more movement. Why? Because now the guitar parts are moving. I want to be in harmony. This is all about being contrasting and different, but you can also be similar in a lot of ways to make sure they gel together and they sound like they go together, okay? So it's all about knowing when to choose what. And again, this lesson is just giving you an oversight. We're going to really dive deep on this in the future, but this is just going to get you thinking. If you haven't thought about compositions like this, start thinking about them. It's not something you always have to do. It's just another tool in your toolbox, another option to have, okay? So, why the chordal parts start moving around more? Because the guitar parts do. Same exact things apply. Before, they were more static. Left hand static, I'm kind of matching that. So now when we come to this part, there's really no special thing about it either. I'm literally outlining the chords they're outlining. E minor, going to sort of an A minor 2, minor 9, then E minor 7 is the bulk. There's 3 chords going on there. E minor, A minor, I guess 9, I'll call it A minor 9. So I have E minor, A minor 9, E minor 7. And I'll kind of outline those two. You can hear where they start and end. A minor, E minor 7, E minor, A, E minor 7. So it's just 3 chords that repeat over and over again. So that's how I'm deriving that. Now what notes I'm playing, there's really nothing to it. I'm playing the roots, the thirds, and the fifths. I'm making chords, you know. This chord may look kind of complicated, but I just have an open A, minor third, fifth, and the 9. I said A minor 9. That's all I have. Okay, now how I'm voicing those and making sure all the notes sound together and sound not muddy, we talked about in lesson 122. If you watch that lesson, you'll know I talked about if we use an open string of any kind, I want to make sure the notes are spread out. So I'm kind of doing any fretted stuff, excuse me, sort of up on these higher frets. Same thing with here. I wouldn't want to take this E minor 7 and do it down here. It doesn't sound good, it starts to sound muddy, so I want to really spread it out. Okay, so if you want a deeper perspective on how I'm voicing these chords, check out the lesson before this 122. So back to how I'm orchestrating this. Again, when it changes to the second part and I have more movement, kind of feels more of a groove coming on there, at least I do, so I kind of add in some lower note movement. And really, if you take away all the chordal stuff, I'm just going. Kind of adding that little tagline on the end there too, on the, I guess the next bass part. Okay, so there's sort of a groove going on. I don't consider that groovy by any means. It's just giving the lower register some movement while still keeping that chordal stuff going on. And you might think in the part before, I'm just playing chords and tapping and doing upper register stuff, but really I have a bass note going on the whole time. Just because I'm strumming it like this, I still have. So at any given time, please take note that I'm not replacing a normal bass part or normal sustained whole note bass parts you might play. I'm just adding on top of them. Okay, that's the whole ideology here. I'm taking a simple outlined whole note, thick root note part. I'm just expanding on it to give the composition more contrast. Okay, so recap, I'm doing the opposites for all the guitar parts. I'm literally thinking what they're doing, I'm not going to do. There we go. I'm doing multiple notes, they're doing single notes. They're in the higher register, I'm going to move into a different register that's not being occupied. Got a lot of high guitar stuff, a lot of drum stuff, really kick drum activity down there. I'm kind of in the middle range. That applies to both parts. Now how they're moving and the speed of which those guitar parts are moving is sort of how I'm pacing my parts. What notes I'm using? Very simple. I'm just using the notes in the chords, root, third, and fifth. And if you know that to a guitar part you're writing to, then the music theory is not a mystery. That's the thing. I want you to be able to write creative bass parts without knowing music theory. If you know it's E minor, great. Root, third, fifth, you're done. It's all about how you use those notes and how you pace them. And now, talking about contrast, where you put them. Okay? Contrasting bass parts. What is nobody else doing? Look for the empty space in the composition. Like I said, we're going to dive deep into this in the future, but I just want to get you thinking. In another world, another parallel universe, I might have just written. And then the next part. But this universe, I wrote something a little cooler. So it's all about having options. That's the cool thing about playing bass. Lots of these options work. We have a lot of creative freedom in an ensemble. You get to choose, and most of the time, all of them are correct options. You kind of have the freedom just to choose which one you want to do. So start exploring, listen to compositions. If you're an original band and you're writing bass parts right now, If you've been sort of writing some bass parts to something, think about them a little bit differently, and you might come up with something that you didn't think you could otherwise, okay? We'll see you next time. Have fun, and talk to you soon.